it was just crazy to me that a cash buyer, we did the closing, we knew everything was done properly, and still gets a knock on his door after closing with some bogus mortgage foreclosure, not even from his debt.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about those things that they happen, or people try to steal the title from the
Sure.
property and go and do a quick claim deeds and things like that. Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to the Krinzman Property Playbook. I am your host, Matthew Krinzman, and today I have Kimberly DeBiasi. Is that like there's there used to be a wrestler out there, Ted DiBiase.
The $1 Million Man.
You have me. Okay, so you know your stuff already. So right there, we're going to have a great conversation then today. Kimberly, you are a real estate attorney locally here with an in-house counsel at Empire Title Services, LLC. Also, you're the managing partner at DiBiasi. I mean, look, tell us about yourself first, and then we'll jump into the whole world of title and closings and real estate closings, and which is always a fun part for me. I love closings, so I'm sure you enjoy them too. So let's tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Yeah. The closing day is the best day.
Yeah,
my background is that I've been a practicing attorney now. I'm in my 17th year of practice, but even before that, I was a realtor before I went to law school. So I was meant to be in the, in the real estate realm. So I worked up in New England for Coldwell Banker as a realtor for just a couple years. And then the timing was that the market started to crash a little bit. And I decided that was a good time to go to law school. So we're talking 2006-ish. And
2006 was still good. I mean,
it was starting. Yes,
the turn was
starting to turn. The turn was coming. Things were booming, and until they weren't. I took the opportunity to go to law school at that time, and I graduated in 2009 when things really had not come back yet, and people weren't doing a whole lot of real estate closings. Things were bad. So I got some experience doing foreclosures and collections on that side of things. And it was about mid-2014 that I found my way to Empire Title and started doing what I really wanted to do when I went to law school, which is the real estate closings. So we have a full service title company for both residential and commercial closings. And then we have our affiliated law firm for anything related to real estate transactions.
So that's something I just want to quickly cover with you is, in Florida, we have different types of we have title companies or escrow title companies, and then we have lawyer-based title companies or lawyers who do real estate lawyers, attorneys and lawyers who can do closings because they can write title. So just quickly, I like to let the people, the listeners know what the difference is between just a title company, an escrow title company, and an attorney-run title company.
Sure. There can be many functions of a title company. Here in Florida, they do not have to be owned or operated by attorneys. So for some attorneys, if they choose to do real estate closings, it's really just a matter of personal preference, whether they do that through their law firm or through a licensed title company. We are attorney owned and operated. We do that through our title company. So we will do things like hold the escrow deposit, clear the title for closing, handle all the disbursements of the funds, and issue the title insurance policy all under one roof. Now, if we needed to represent a party to the transaction, we would put our hat on then for Broward DiBiasi, the law firm, and we would actually legally represent a party to the transaction and their interests in that.
So that's really the big difference between just a straight regular title company that's not attorney run versus one that has an attorney in-house or attorney-run title company, is that if something pops up, and this is real estate, and it does, and there's contracts and times and things that have to be adhered to, parties could get into a situation where legal advice is helpful. I think I believe in it. I come from a background of attorneys who are real estate attorneys here in South Florida, in Miami, and that's always been my preference as a real estate agent, is to suggest and to recommend a title-owned company that has a real estate attorney in-house or is owned by a real estate attorney. So I think there's an advantage, definitely an advantage for buyers and sellers to have that in-house.
I would agree with you. When we are designated as the title company, we're a neutral third party. So we're not advocating for either side, but we are advocating for the contract. We're tracking the deadlines, making sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And like you said, if something does come up, a lot of times on the title commitment, an issue might come up that the parties weren't aware of. We are well equipped to jump in and start handling it without them having to seek out independent attorneys that would otherwise need to jump in if the title company didn't have one.
Yeah, I've always found that, when issues have arisen in the past, and they're always going to come up, things happen that when there's an attorney involved, at least, handling one side, or, even though you're supposed to be neutral, but say you're handling the buyer's side of the deal, you can be give better advice than what I can as a real estate agent, because it does say clearly on the contract, real estate agents are not attorneys and cannot give legal advice. Although most of us who have been in the business a long time have pretty good understandings of the contracts by now,
Right.
hopefully. But you don't want to get in trouble, and you don't want to get into litigation or get sued, and have my license at risk for this. So I always recommend that. It just helps. I think it's just, there's a level-headedness, a clear-headedness that can be with an attorney involved that can smooth it out. And then if there's an attorney on the other side, great. Sometimes I think
Right.
that attorney to attorney, things get done. And real estate agents, we're an emotional bunch sometimes.
It happens. It happens. And I
Yeah.
think, like you said, we're all accustomed to the forms that are used in the state of Florida, the as-is
Mhm.
contract, the condo riders and things of that
Oh,
nature, but they're ever changing. And a
oh,
lot of
ever.
times there are attorneys involved in the transaction that maybe have modified the contract. So that's
Yes.
always the first place we go when something arises, whether it's a dispute over the deposit or a title issue. Even as a seasoned attorney, my first go-to is look at the contract, see what it says, see what we're dealing with here, what the obligations are from either side.
Right. And then one thing good, I would say for the most part, the good part about at least the state of Florida and the FAR bar contracts is what we use as agents to write the contracts. They're fairly solid for the most part. I mean, there's always something you can find in there that could not be great, but I mean, these are written by the Florida Association of Realtors and the Bar Association of Florida. They're approved forms by the state legislature. So these are things that have been, I think the attorneys and the legislature and the Florida Association of Realtors have pretty much come up with almost every possible situation that to cover in the contract, especially now with the condo rider. I know we're going kind of talking a little bit, just out of order, but the condo rider, when I started, was maybe one page. Now it's 4 or 5 pages
I think
long
it's
at
up to
this
5
point.
pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
It's confusing. It's very
Right.
confusing as an agent now. And I've had to go to attorneys and the attorney, whoever on which side I'm dealing with, and say, can you review this? Because I think I'm missing something. Because really, that's, again, if I miss something, the contract's no good at that point. Like someone missed an
Right.
initial or thing like that. I think it's helpful to have an attorney review it, especially the condo. Like I said, the condo writers are way confusing between the SIRS reports, milestone reports, handover reports, all these things that now are coming into play. And now
Right.
the extension of the time to review all these documents, which went
I
from
think
three
that's one of the
days
most
originally.
confusing parts to people
Yeah,
is what the extension period is and
right.
how long do they have to review the documents? When does that period end? And it's not until the buyer gets that complete set of
True.
documents that the time even starts ticking on the deadline. So there's a lot to that condo rider now, and the buyer retains their right to cancel the contract and get their deposit back. So it's more important than ever that those
Right.
are filled out properly and everyone's aware of the timelines.
Right. Because I think it's like, it's 3 days, 3 business days to review the condo docs, but now you have something like 7 days, business days to review a SIRS report or the milestone reports or the developer handover report to to the association. So there's timelines now get extended even. There's still more ways for a buyer to cancel the contract based on there's something they just don't like what they read in the report. There's a lot going on now, especially in the condos, between all these new reports that we have to have ready and we have to collect from the associations. I mean, it's a job in itself with
It
all
can
this work
be.
now.
One piece of advice that I like to give to buyers is make sure, there's all those check boxes, there's documents that you're
Mhm.
entitled to. You want to take a look at that budget and see the dollars and cents, but really look back at the meeting minutes for the last 12 months that the board has had, because that's going to tell you what they're discussing that can come up in the future that maybe isn't reflected on an estoppel certificate where the association is going to say what's due and what's specially assessed so far.
Right.
These could be things that they're talking down the road of maybe replacing the roof, and you'll want to know as a new unit owner that you might be responsible for that.
One thing I do tell all my buyers, look, it's a condominium. It may not have anything right now. Their assessments may be paid, but there's always something that's going to come up with these buildings, whatever it is. Associations want to change out the carpets in the hallways. They want to make improvements, or they have to have something fixed. The AC unit for the building goes bad and you have to replace that. There's always something, but it's like owning a house. If you owned the
Hmm.
house, hey, your roof could go bad, your AC could go bad, everything, all those things could happen, but you're living under one roof with a 300 neighbors
Right,
basically in
right.
one place, and you're all
To share the
responsible for the
costs.
place. You have to share the costs. I mean, and look, in some cases, these assessments have been astronomical,
Yep.
but that's
Yeah.
due to And I tell a lot of buyers, you have, like you just said, you have to look at the minutes, you have to look at the budget. The budget is a very important part of the contract, or at least of the documents to gather, because then you can see what they were paying for the year before and now what they're approving for the year next. And then you get in a sense now with also the reports for reserve studies, it now shows a little bit more further down the road. Hey, these are things you're going to have to start putting money away for or have an assessment for at some
Mhm.
point, because these just, hey, mechanicals go bad. Things have to get fixed. They have to be replaced over time. And which, unfortunately, a lot of associations did not do for many years. What happened to Surfside, I think, then
Right.
forced the state to get involved, the government, the state legislature to get involved, and the governor to get involved and make these changes. Because if you left the associations to themselves, they would never make these changes on their own, unfortunately. But
Some
anyway,
of them
let's just
weren't.
get back into the whole we're the title company in a Florida real estate closing. What do you guys do exactly? Behind the scenes,
Sure.
what's going on?
So we are holding the funds for the buyer during the duration of the transaction. We're tracking the critical deadlines under the contract to make sure everything's moving forward. But really, most importantly, we're pulling a title examination and a lien search to see what the state of affairs of that property is. We want to make sure we know exactly who the owners are, if it's a company who has the authority to sign on behalf of that company, seeing if there's any liens out there. Liens can be a scary word, but most
Mhm. Of
properties do have liens on them. Any of us
course.
who have a mortgage on our home, we have a lien on our home,
Yep.
and that's fine. That will be paid off at the time of closing, but it's up to us to take the steps to discover that that lien exists, find out how it gets paid to at the time of closing, the amount that gets paid. We look at the property taxes to make sure those are up to date, and if not, we also collect that on the settlement statement at the time of closing. So we're really doing all the due diligence to make sure that that buyer is going to receive legal title at the time of closing, and of course they'll get their title insurance policy ensuring their interest in the property.
So you're just making everything and at least on the title side, everything is clean and there's no liens. Just curious, how long does it normally take to have a title pulled and reviewed on average?
Mhm.
What's time? Because you see in the shows, especially like in $1 Million Listing LA, they go to a contract and they're closing 10 days later. And
Right.
people say, can you do that in Florida? You could, but and I haven't seen it. It comes not unless you're not doing title insurance, unless you're just like,
Right.
hey, I'm not going to do title insurance. I'm just going to go without it. But what would be the average time length for, say, to pull title and get, to really get to a closing on average if there was no lender
Mhm.
involved?
Okay, with no lender involved. So I think also that's still a conditional answer because it really depends. We were talking a lot about condos. So if you're
Mhm.
within a condo or a homeowners association, a lot of times the association has to approve the buyer to be an
Right.
owner, and that can be a 30-day process. So
True.
even though we might be able to get a title examination back in just a few days, the lien search from the municipality sometimes can take up to 2 weeks, and then that association approval can take up to 30 days. So if we have a cash buyer and there's no association involved, we can probably get a closing done in about 10 to 14 days. It's
Right.
really just going to depend on those other factors. And also when the title comes back, if it's not clear and we have to take curative measures to get the
Mhm.
title clear, we can be again dealing with a municipality or maybe a contractor that we need compliance with before we can get that closed. But it's that, attorney response of it depends. We could probably do it in 10 to 14 days, but all those other factors are going to come into play.
Yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult, especially with if you're dealing with a city, you have to do the lien search and water utilities, searches with the city. Like you said, 2 weeks is about right, unless you pay extra for that for the
Right.
rush. But not all cities have a rush. None of them. Again, most cities are never in a rush to do anything as it is. So yeah, so
Their
you really
commission's
have
not on the line. They don't need the closing
no,
date
they
to
don't
come.
care. They're there Monday through Friday. Some are there only Monday through Thursday in some
Right.
cities. So if you're working with a city that's only open Monday through Thursday, their offices, then Friday, forget nothing's happening on Fridays there for them.
So we do our best. We want to be as efficient as possible, but we are
Right.
subject to those, third parties at times.
Right. So there's a lot of scams going on in the world. And I know this one has been, at least with title and escrow, there's been this one in particular where people will send an email saying, hey, send the wire transfer to this
Mm.
account. And under the guise of it's coming from a title company, which was was one of the scams I know that was going on for a while. I'm sure they've developed and become more sophisticated over the last few years. But what are you seeing? How as a title company are you protecting and ensuring that these scammers don't get in the middle somehow and the escrow
Right.
funds are secured?
Right. So we take a number of measures. The first thing that we do is we use a third-party vendor called Payload, which is available right on our website. If you go to empiretitleservices.com, you can make an escrow deposit right on our website, which is going to avoid one of the high-risk components, which is getting wire instructions sent to you right at the start of the transaction before people
Yeah.
know each other. So
Right.
one of the biggest things is we don't email wire instructions. Email can easily be hacked, the numbers can be changed, and now people are sending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to the wrong party.
Mhm.
So I would say the first thing that we do is that escrow deposit right from our website. Once the parties know each other and they've got our phone number saved in their phone, you can always call to verify our wire instruction or text us even to receive those wire instructions. We also make sure to tell parties from the start that our wire instructions are not going to change during this transaction, because I think that was one of the scams that was happening, is that there was a last minute change in wire instructions, wires are getting diverted, and it can be scary. And when buyers want to close and sellers want their proceeds, and there's that urgency to it, people don't take the precautions that they should, so we take the precautions for them. We also have a third party vendor called Certified that will verify wire instructions known for banks where we're sending wire payoffs to, and they will also verify sellers' wire instructions before we send out any proceeds to sellers by wire. So we're always utilizing the best technology that we can to make the transaction go smoothly and to make sure that those funds are handled safely.
Luckily, it's never happened in any of my transactions, but it got close one time where
Mhm.
I was on the buyer side and it was time for closing. And I guess that, the hackers got into the emails and they sent an email to him and said, all right, hey, for the wire transfer sent to here. And luckily it triggered something in his mind, like this
That
doesn't
little
seem
voice,
right.
right? Mhm.
And thank God he had the presence to mind to call the office and say, hey, I just got this email. It seems a little off. And they're like, no, 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 that's not from us. Do not do
Right,
this. I mean, thankfully he was cognizant enough and to savvy not to say like that doesn't seem right. So
right,
thankfully it hasn't happened, but it almost happened.
right.
But I've heard the horror stories. It does happen, and I'm sure now they're just more sophisticated ways of doing it than just old email.
And it sounds like your buyer was pretty savvy too, to not use a phone number that was in the email, because that's sometimes what people would fall victim to as well, is they would put a
Yeah,
fake phone number in the email. So when you called, they would confirm the phony wire instructions. So it's important to use, as I said, a trusted phone number that's been saved from the start, or even the phone number you see on the title company's website.
I can only imagine now with AI coming into play that this is going to get just more and more sophisticated
Sure.
as a ways because there's what now they're even doing even AI video now is just so leaps and bounds what it was 2 years ago that when you look today and you see online like you have to scratch your head, you have to really squint hard at it. Is
Mm.
that real or is that fake or is it AI? And I'm sure now the legal world and the real estate world and all the other financial players in the world are going to start getting more and more. They're going to have to ratchet up their sophistication level of being able
Sure.
to decipher what's
Detecting.
real, what's not, or is this buyer for real? Is this seller for real? Is this lender for real? Is this for real? Is anyone for real?
Right.
So I can only imagine it's going to be this get everyone's level of sophistication to weed these scams out is going to have to ratchet up higher and higher because have heard from some people that got scammed because the buyer or whoever was getting a loan or was trying to buy something got a loan actually their level like they had documents that were doctored that were produced and they somehow were able to fool even the mobile notary
Wow.
into thinking that hey I'm who I am supposed to be but I'm not. That opens up yourself to lawsuits too at that point. So again, it's
You
just
can't
getting
be
so
too
more and more.
careful. Awareness
Yeah,
that that stuff exists is the first step.
right. Awareness is the first step. So when first of all, I like if I'm on the buyer side, I always make a recommendation. They always ask a recommendation if they don't have their own attorney or title company already. So I like
Mhm.
to give three that I've worked with over the years that I know and I trust. So once they say, hey, we're going to work with Empire. What are the steps? How does everything start working with you guys? Where everything that's coming into play with you?
So, from the start, when the realtors are helping to draft the contract, the escrow agent is usually going to be the title company. So, the escrow agent is who is holding the funds, and their contact information goes right on the first page of the contract. So, once the parties have negotiated their deal and everybody's signed off on it, the first step is for us to receive that contract at the title company so we can get everything rolling. So, from our end, we have standard welcome emails that we send out to all the parties, letting them know the information we need to gather from them, and and we immediately start the process of ordering those title and lien searches that we discussed while the buyer is in the process of doing their inspection, applying for their loan, maybe applying for homeowners association approval.
Right.
And we keep the ball rolling from there. So you'll always have the same point of contact with our office. We'll keep you involved every step of the way, letting you know when those search results come in and what steps might have to be taken before closing.
Right. And then also, if there's a lender involved, how do you operate with co-work with the lenders?
So similarly, once the contract is signed, the lender will also get a copy of that with our contact information, and they will independently reach out to us. Sometimes the realtors will connect us right from the start so
Right.
that we can be as efficient as possible. So they place with us what's known as a title order, because at the closing, the owner is going to receive their title policy, but the lender also gets insured for their part of the transaction as well. They get a lender's policy.
So that's a very good topic just now. So I've had times where like buyers are like, "What's this lender's policy?" And then yeah, I try to explain it, but help us, decipher what the difference between the owner's policy and the lender's policy.
Sure. They're very similar, but basically the insured under the policy, under an owner's policy, is going to be the owner of the property, and under the lender's policy is going to be the lender or the mortgagee. And so what we're ensuring for a lender is that their lien is in first position on the property. So if anything happened and the buyer could not make their loan payments and they needed to foreclose, there's no one else that's going to come above their interest in the property. So once they file their foreclosure, they would then get title to the property back. So that's one of the reasons that we have to do all of our diligence when it comes to
Right.
property taxes or anything that could potentially be a lien on the property that could take precedence over the mortgage loan that we're putting on the property at the time of closing.
So when we're talking about condos and HOAs before, the dreaded estoppel letter. I've had occasions where where the delays happen because the association has not provided the estoppel letter in a timely manner, or they
Sure.
forget things on there. So how do you handle that when they're not, when the associations are not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being helpful.
Well, the good thing is that they are bound by statute to
Mhm.
comply within a certain amount of time and charge you only a certain amount of money for the estoppel that they're providing. So we are proactive. We stay on top of them to make sure that they're providing us the information that we need. And then that's what we can rely on at the time of closing to put on the settlement statement to say what the upcoming assessments are and who's responsible for them. But there are definitely times that we need to push and make sure that we get what we need. But again, as we discussed in the beginning, we have attorneys on staff. So if we need to send a letter to an association reminding them of what their statutory obligations are, we do that.
Would you say now, when you're able to send an attorney's letter like that to remind association of their
Mhm.
responsibilities, you said that's a difference between an attorney run title company and a non-attorney run title company, that you have that ability to do that?
I think so, because I think if a title company is sending out a letter like that and they're not attorneys, they're running the risk of unlicensed practice of law. So for myself, I can send a letter as in-house counsel of Empire Title Services, letting them know that they've, breached their obligations under the statute as far as
Mhm.
the deadlines of what they need, what information they need to provide to us.
Yeah, I always find that when it's an attorney letterhead, that seems to get things moving a little bit quicker at times. 'Cause I think
Sometimes it
last thing
gets
they
the ball
want is
rolling.
litigation. So we talked about how I would a lot of times recommend, but there's in Miami and Broward, Miami-Dade County and Broward County, the buyers select the
Mhm.
title and escrow. In Palm Beach, it's the seller who selects. How is that different? What's the differentiation there on that as far as
Sure.
getting title work done? And since the buyer's not selecting in Palm Beach, how's that is that differentiate between the other counties?
Sure. So we actually do have a helpful resource on our website that has a map of the state of Florida, and it shows you what the customs are in each county.
It's good to
And
know.
they are just customs. They are built into the contract where typically if the buyer is in Miami or Broward, they're going to pay for their owner's title insurance policy and they're going to select the title company that handles the closing. If you are in Palm Beach, that customarily is the seller, but everything's negotiated by contract if the parties wanted to change that. So
Right.
there isn't much difference aside from if the seller is the one who wants to designate us, but they happen to be in Broward County and the buyer selected a different title company, they can still use our services. We would then just put on our hat as seller's attorney under Broward DeBiasi. We would still be able to represent them in that transaction and monitor everything and make sure it goes smoothly. So I think it just depends what role we need to play, but we can still be involved to help either side of the transaction.
Right. I just curious. I think I know the answer to it, but why? I do certain counties have the buyer select and then others have the seller select. So at least in the Tri-County area. Why is Palm
Mhm.
Beach the exception
Ooh,
to the
I'd
rule?
love to hear if you know that answer because
I
I'm not
I
really sure what it dates back to.
my understanding was is because the old title where they used to keep the titles back, the old title depository or library, whatever
Mhm.
it was, burned down at some point.
Oh,
And that was my understanding. So I don't know if that's true or not, but
interesting.
if that's
The
the
title
case,
plant.
yeah, the title plant burned down or something like that. So they had to basically redo titles. So I don't know if that's true or not, but what would be the reasoning for having one county different from the other? Or is that
Yeah, I'm really
just
not sure.
custom?
I'm interested actually to do some research now that we've talked
Yeah.
about that. I've
That
just
was
kind of
told
been
me. I
aware of
don't
the
know.
customs in each
Yeah.
county and you can always change it. There's no restriction. It's all by
Right.
contract. If you want to pay for the title insurance policy, you can designate the title company regardless of what side you're on. And
Right.
if the title insurance policy premium is based on the purchase price. So, it just depends whether that's a business decision for you. But I'm interested to do some research and see
Yeah,
if that's the
that's what I
case.
was told many, many years ago, so I don't know if it's true or
Hmm.
not. I never bothered to look it up, but that's what I
Right.
was
It's one of
told.
those things that's just been
Yeah, like,
done that
okay,
way.
that sounds believable to me. I mean, maybe that's what maybe it's the truth or not. But just when you mention seller sides, a lot of times when I'm on the seller side of the deal, and the buyer has selected the title and for whom to do title. A lot of times the seller is like, well, do I need an attorney for myself? Can I
Mhm.
just have the buyer's, agent just create the seller's docs for me and I'll sign.
Sure.
Is there a benefit or is it a disadvantage or is it a benefit to the seller just to use, "Hey, okay, do my documents for me,"
Mhm.
or does it have good representation?
So I think there's a benefit to having your own representation, just like each side has their realtor, just so
Mhm.
that you have someone with eyes on the transaction from your perspective. Now, from a logistical standpoint, what you would do on the seller side of the transaction as a title company is prepare those conveyance documents like the deed, the bill of sale, the closing affidavit.
Mhm.
Those sort of things can be drafted by the closing agent and used at the time of closing, and they'll charge you a fee for that service. But quite often, to have my representation of a seller where I'm drafting those documents, but I'm also representing them and reviewing the other documents of the
Right.
transaction, tracking those critical deadlines, making sure that the settlement statement has exactly what it's supposed to have on there. You kind of get that up leveled representation for right around the same cost that a title company is going to charge you for the closing fee.
Mhm.
So, really, just a personal decision on what your comfort level is.
Great. So when you're at closing, there's different types of deeds and way to take possession of a home when you're a buyer. What are the different deeds that a buyer could take or a new owner
Mhm.
could take the possession of their property under?
So the most common deed that you'll see is that you're going to get a warranty deed at the
Mhm.
time of closing and you'll take title in your individual name or if it's a married couple as a married couple. And there are other ways that you can kind of do some proactive planning that some people like to do. I don't know if you've heard of a Ladybird Deed.
Yes.
Really the formal name of
Mhm.
it is an enhanced life estate deed. So what that does is it has someone on title to the property now, but it also names who inherits that property from them once they pass away. So instead of having to go through the probate court process or having to draft a revocable trust to
Right.
hold property in, you can actually kind of take that shortcut and place right on the deed the adults who will inherit the property from you. Because I do want to make sure, even if it's children, that it's adult children so that we don't have minors on title.
I've had occasions where one spouse is not on the contract, but they get put on the deed. How does that work exactly?
So it's really going to depend on whether there is a loan involved or if it's a cash transaction. If it's a cash transaction, you can place someone on the deed even if they didn't pay consideration for the property. If there's a loan involved, if they're the owners of the property all have to sign the mortgage, even if they're not obligated under the note. But what we do see sometimes is one spouse on title and the other not on, and then it becomes confusing sometimes of what their interest in the property is, especially
Right.
if it's their primary residence in Florida.
Yeah, I've seen again just personal experience where I had a closing. Again, I was on the buyer's side, and it was a condominium. Sell a lot of condominiums, obviously. The seller got married the weekend before the closing,
Hmm.
and I remember sitting there with my buyer at the closing table, and the attorney was like, "We now need to get the seller's newly wedded wife to sign because she is even though she was not
An
involved, there was
owner.
no wife
Mhm.
when he was been under contract. But now there's a wife, so now there's you have a claim. I guess it could be a claim, or it could be, hey, it's marital property. I suppose it becomes marital property, but again." There's just these things that come up. Yeah, I always love them.
And you know what this comes down to is Florida's homestead protections, because
Mhm.
if it's your primary residence, whether or not you get the homestead tax exemption or not, if it is your primary residence and you are married, even if your spouse is not on title, they don't have an ownership interest, but they have an interest in that property based on homestead.
Right,
So their consent is required for you to sell. So you might see on those deeds that person isn't listed as an owner. They're actually
right.
joining their spouse on the deed and giving their consent to sell. So it doesn't mean they'll get sale proceeds. It doesn't mean that they had any ownership right in there, but they did have a homestead interest in the property.
When do you recommend for buyers to use an LLC or take possession or a corporate structure?
Mhm.
LLCs I know are used a lot of times by foreign buyers or people buying investment property. But what is the benefit of putting it on our LLC at that point as a buyer?
So I would think that a lot of investors, if you're not going to use it for your primary residence, are interested in either anonymity or are interested in limiting their liability in case
Okay.
someone that they rent the property to slips or falls or injures themselves at the property. Some of those liabilities could be minimized by having the correct insurance policy on the property if you didn't want to hold it in an LLC. And I know we're talking a lot about condos today. Some condo associations will not
Don't
allow you
allow
to
it.
hold title
Yeah.
in an LLC. So you might have to have a workaround in that instance as well.
Yes, there's a lot of condos don't allow a corporate owner, the corporate structure or corporate owner,
Mhm.
even though, yeah, they just don't allow it. I've seen it quite a bit. We just briefly mentioned when the Ladybird, but just what if there's someone who dies in like to say is intestate with no
Mhm.
will, no plan? How does the property get handled?
So I think one of the common confusions is that if you have a will that you don't have to go through probate. So
Which is
whether
not
it's
true.
it's not true.
Yeah, right,
Whether it's a it depends how the deed is titled. So whether it's
right,
intestate without a will or whether you have a will, what we really look at is how that property was held. So if it was husband and wife, a married couple, and one person passed away, automatically title is going to pass to the surviving spouse without having to go through the probate process. And that doesn't have any effect on whether they had a will or didn't have a will. If we're
right.
dealing with foreign nationals, we also have to look at whether any estate taxes might have to be cleared, which at that point you'd want to get an accountant involved, and the IRS has to get involved. But
Correct. Yeah,
for US citizens or residents, it's a pretty straightforward process. But we have to look first at what's on title. So if we have someone who passes away in just their name and there's no one else on that deed, they haven't done the Ladybird, they didn't have a spouse on there, now that property does have to go through the probate process. So if there is no will and it is intestate, then the Florida statutes are going to say who inherits that property. So it sort of
right.
takes that right away from the person who passed away to designate who the property goes to.
Right, so then you're in probate court for however long it takes, and property has to get this there's a disposition of the property. Sometimes the judge will say, "Well, we'll just go sell it, and then we'll figure out the proceeds from there," which
Correct.
I've worked on a few probates over my career. They're fairly smooth at the end of the day. Yeah, it's just at least on my side. Look, they just wanna
Right.
get it sold. Hey, I'm gonna get it sold, and then let the judge figure it out between them at that point, but we do our job, and I have to always show to the judge or to the court, hey, this is what I think the property is valued at. They need that part for at
Yes,
least to
they're looking for a broker
establish.
price opinion
Yeah,
to establish
sometimes,
that.
and even sometimes they want, like, what was the value, when they purchased it.
Mhm.
You have to go backwards because there's there are all these crazy tax issues, step up basis and things like that. That thank God there are accountants in the world who understand these things
I
because
agree.
sometimes it's just over my head. So what could I just want to say, like, when do you have to file homestead when someone buys a property in state of Florida? Because I get to ask that question, but
Mhm.
what's really the right time to file the homestead exemption?
So my recommendation, if you take title to a property that you are living in and that is going to be your homestead, my recommendation is to file as soon as possible, even if it's not going to take effect until the next tax year. So you do have to be the owner before January 1. So typically you're
Yeah.
going to be the owner in 2025 if you're applying for 2026 homestead tax exemption. And then
Mhm.
you have a few months there. I believe the deadline is April
Yeah.
for filing for your homestead application. But I have seen situations where if you're late on that deadline for filing online, they might accept your application if you walk it into the location. So
Right.
there's a little bit of wiggle room there, but really the bright line rule is that you have to be the owner as of January 1st. So it's going to take effect in probably the year after you take title, but some people forget to apply. So I would say do it right away, even if it's going to take effect for the next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great benefit to have as it is, especially if you're living here. It's your permanent residence, whatever it is.
Mhm.
If you're living here 6 months plus whatever, how many days you have to be in order to establish domicile. But just out of curiosity, does your firm offer any like, resources on how to establish domicile for people you're working with who are buying property in the state of Florida?
Sure, we can always assist. If we know that they want to have this as their primary residence, there's actually no timing requirement. It's just it's their intent to reside there and it's used as their primary residence. A lot of people travel, so it doesn't have to be any specific time frame, but we can
Right.
certainly help with the application process with gathering the documents that are required and submitting that application online.
Okay. So just I always like to know, like, to hear the personal stories. Any crazy? I know you have to. You can't say You have to keep some. You can't say everything because there's obviously attorney-client privileges. Any super crazy transactions that have happened in while your time being an attorney and working in
Mhm.
real estate as a real estate attorney. Wow, this was just absolutely nuts what I just went through.
I've had a few of them that were pretty crazy. I think the one that stands out in my mind the most is actually the story that I tell to show people how important title insurance is, and that
Okay,
is we
great.
had a cash buyer that closed with us, and everything went great. Gets his title insurance policy, and a few months after closing, he gets a knock on his door from a process server serving him with a mortgage foreclosure lawsuit. Now, this was a cash buyer who didn't take out a mortgage at closing, so he was utterly confused. And once he came to us to try to sort through things, we realized that there was a mistake on behalf of the lender for the previous owner where
Uh,
they filed some documents taking back their satisfaction of mortgage. Whatever they did was improper. And the good news for the buyer was that although this was already in litigation, what his title insurance policy did was it covers the attorney's fees to hire an attorney on his behalf to defend this lawsuit and make it go away. It ultimately did settle. The bank acknowledged their mistake, but it took several months of this being in the court process. And
right.
so, had he not had a title insurance policy to rely on, he would have had to come out of pocket and defend himself in that lawsuit. So, it was just crazy to me that a cash buyer, we did the closing, we knew everything was done properly, and still gets a knock on his door after closing with some bogus mortgage foreclosure, not even from his debt.
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot about those things that they happen, or people try to steal the title from a
Sure.
property and go and do a quick claim deeds and things like that.
Hmm.
But again, here's the benefit of having the title insurance, not to, especially if you're a cash buyer. Whatever the fee is, whatever is the cost, it's peace of mind.
It's
God
peace
bless
of
anyone who
mind.
wants to go without it. If they have that ability and they're well off, or they just have the money they can use it to defend themselves or things like that come up. But it
I
definitely
think you could
to just
probably
add it,
find better ways to use that money.
you would think, but
But also a free resource for anyone who wants to make sure that their title is protected is all of the property appraiser's website will let you sign up for property fraud alerts so that if a deed or something is recorded as to your property, you'll get an email notification and they'll actually mail a copy of it to your home as well. So you can just go right on your property appraiser's website and sign up for those free fraud alerts.
awesome. Just, I mean, before we wrap up, I just was curious, what are you seeing as far as technology in the title world? We hear a lot about the blockchain, and we hear a lot about these companies or title companies that are going to do everything now on the blockchain. Is this
Mhm.
coming to fruition? Is this finally happening? Because been hearing it for at least over 10 years. And
I was going to say that.
I have one interview with a company locally based here called Title, spelled TITL, and they're in that
Mhm.
space. So
Mhm.
is this really happening? Are we going to finally see the process of title get put on the blockchain where we can actually close in a lot quicker time and have less mistakes, I guess, or
I would
remove
say
any?
just as you said, I've been hearing about this probably for the better part of a decade. I have not seen any tangible steps in that direction. And I know that the underwriters are usually pretty conservative with things like that. So I'm not aware of anything that's closely on the horizon. I would be surprised if it's happening anytime soon, but I don't count it out. Technology is ever changing and it's certainly possible to do. It's just going to be a matter of whether the underwriters will get on board with it.
This is underwriters. Okay. Gotcha. So you mean the title companies?
So each of us title companies have an underwriter that issues the title policy. So some of the big ones are Old Republic, First National, Westcor, Stewart. So they're really the ones that are in
Mhm.
the driver's seat as far as those decisions because it's their money on the line when a title policy has to be utilized.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, to wrap it up, any words of wisdom for the sellers and buyers who are transacting in real estate, either on the residential or on the commercial side?
Words of wisdom would be to use a seasoned realtor, because that is really the first point of contact for for
I
anything.
agree wholeheartedly with that statement.
They're going to be drafting the contract and hopefully
Right.
looping in an attorney, but a well-experienced realtor is going to be able to hit a lot of these problems head on and help prevent them.
Right. And your in your world and your on your side, is there any words as to the benefits and really why I look, I'm a believer in
Mhm.
using attorney run title companies, but is there any other benefits or just anything quick that you could say to that, hey, this is why you should consider using attorney based?
Yeah, I mean, quite often this is going to be the biggest investment that people are going to make in their lives. And where we live in South Florida, I mean, it's around $1 million for entry level properties these days. So it
Yeah.
is no small investment. And when you look at the settlement statement, what you might pay for attorney's fees and for a title company, it's a small, very small
Yes.
percentage of that investment. And as I mentioned earlier, having your own seller's attorney is usually around the same cost as having the title company prepare your documents. So it's just always a good idea to have someone in your corner looking at those documents from your perspective.
Things like that. You're paying a lot of money, like you said, for a home. This is really, it's not worth it to start being budget conscious at that
Mhm,
point. Really,
mhm.
especially when it comes to anything legal and keep you as a buyer, as a seller to make sure that it's smooth and that you don't have anything come down the road, hopefully coming
Right.
knocking on your door. But if,
Mhm.
as a buyer, consider title insurance. You heard the story, so it's definitely worthwhile. So Kimberly, how can the folks out there listening to us, how can they find you? Where can they find Empire Title?
So we are on Instagram at Empire Title Services. You can also visit our website, empiretitleservices.com. We've got videos up there with our frequently asked questions and some resources for buyers, sellers, and realtors.
Awesome. Great. Kimberly, thank you very much. I guess was Kimberly DeBiasi, not related to the $1 Million Man. Nonetheless, I'm impressed that you knew that, and it gets points with me. Again, folks who are listening, consider when you're buying or selling a property, a real estate attorney is definitely someone you should have on your side in the transaction. If you found this useful and helpful, pass it along to your friends, family, associates. Give us a like, give us a comment, and tune in to the next episode. Thank you very much. I'm Matthew Krinzman, and this was the Krinzman Property Playbook. If you're ready to play smarter in South Florida's real estate market, the next episode is packed with strategies and conversation you do not want to miss. Click the video on the screen to keep watching the Krinzman Property Playbook.